NCRP Productions presents On the Road, DunDraCon 46. Welcome and good evening. We are going to be doing the DunDraCon talk, the post-DunDraCon 46 discussion for those of us who made it down to, again, DunDraCon. I've said that so many times, it's now sounding like I need to fix that. But we're going to be talking with the group that went down and kind of see what everyone did and what you liked, what you didn't like. So starting off, this is Barry. I'm here, I guess, leading this thing.
Hey, everybody, it's Pedro. Also here, probably should be leading something.
You probably
extent,
should,
but
absolutely.
Maybe I'll do some leading. So,
hi everyone, it's your DM Dave. I do the Star Wars Fantasy Flight games. Pleasure to be here.
Hello everyone, this is David, the hard-paying fan.
And this is Ty, the fifth guy.
The fifth guy. The guy we added because we needed somebody to pull the other side of the wheels down. There was an empty seat,
and they're like, the seat's going to go bad if no one sits in it.
Yeah, we need to balance it out.
I just love that I accidentally took your name because I'm always DM David and you're always Dave.
I know,
so
I didn't know.
I think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, so I need to clarify that.
That was funny.
David for this one, David.
Right.
He's also the GM
so
for
the Dave's
Shadowrun.
switched, but I think we can roll with that. So DunDraCon, we as a group made the decision that we were going to head down. We invited quite a number of the people from the podcast. The five of us ended up getting to go down. Mm-hmm. It was February 17th through 20th. It would have been President's Day weekend. We chose to go a day early. We went down on Thursday. So the drive down, Pedro, you and I rode together. It was pretty easy.
Yeah, honestly, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, we talked mostly like podcast stuff.
That's true. And
News
nobody wants
stories.
to hear about that.
No.
So David and Ty, we'll use the names we normally use.
Yeah.
David and Ty, you guys drove together. Anything interesting on the drive down?
I mean, yeah. What you can't spend 6 hours in a car with someone and not have an interesting time, right?
Yes,
I
you
remember
can. Challenge accepted.
Yeah.
At Burger King, you guys were saying you were talking about something interesting.
Oh yeah. So what else are you gonna do on a 6.5-hour drive with fellow nerds other than talk about nerd stuff? So we were having a debate about what qualifies as low fantasy. It was a very long discussion, and it extended far beyond our lunch break and into the car ride to the hotel. And I won't get into the points because I feel like if I make David's points for him, he'll feel embarrassed. But needless to say, the discussion's over.
Points were made and discussion was finished.
I'm
interested.
Yeah, so we were having to talk about what it considers low fantasy, and for me, high fantasy is high magical. It's a world of wonder. It's not just, there's elves. Someone can cast firebolt. It's, hey, how easy is my life? Because how prevalent, like in, major franchises like Harry Potter, stuff like that. Like, hey, I can just walk around with a cup that fills with water. This is mundane to me. The magical has become mundane. So low fantasy has to be, doesn't mean that, there's no magic. It just means there's less of it.
But the point of contention was that David thought that D&D was low fantasy.
5e specifically.
I'm still calling your bull ass on that.
It's 5e is low fantasy. 3.5 is a high fantasy because you're casting like 24 spells for one spell slot. Like way higher, way more castability, way more versatility.
I will say D&D 5e like raw rules really does want you to restrict magic weapons. Like I don't know if I would
nothing goes over a +3 if I understood the rules right.
Yeah, but like even like it's just they don't want you to hand out magic weapons. Like they really want magic weapons to be like this huge thing. But Aya came from 3.5, which is definitely the high fantasy like.
Oh no! Okay,
thank you.
No.
Thank you.
No.
Wait. Okay, maybe.
No. These are different shades of red. Like this is all high fantasy. Like technically this one you don't get the longsword till magical longsword till level 7. Like everyone and their mother in D&D can cast magic. There's no scarcity of magic. There's effectively one class that can't cast magic, right? Like everyone else can some way, shape, or form get access to it.
Yeah, actually,
everyone can cast magic.
Even for that matter,
yeah,
never mind. Everyone can cast magic.
That's fair.
There's no scarcity. For me, low magic or low fantasy, amongst other things, but predominantly for this argument, is a scarcity of magic. And D&D for me is not that. It is everything. Like magic is the most common. Like, hey, heat up that pot of water, cast prestidigitation on it. Cool, thanks, done. Like that's the world they've painted.
So here's my thing, Dave. You basically played every edition of D&D and fairly heavily, more than I think all of us as a group combined.
Yeah.
What's your feeling with these kind of parameters they've set up? What do you feel about low and high fantasy? Which editions are low? Are any of the editions high?
Well, I think, having played each version of D&D to date, I think the level of fantasy, whether it be low, mid, or high, has to do with more than the presence or absence of magic. It's about what is fantastical about that game, about that setting. Is it magic, but also what kind of fantastical creatures exist in that setting, right? Is an orc something that's rarely seen or feared across the land, but no one's really seen one or lived to tell the tale? Or are they rampant everywhere you go? No matter if you go out of town, do you run into a pack of orcs no matter what? I think that kind of helps delineate high fantasy from low fantasy, and along with what David and Ty are saying, and you guys are saying with the absence, who can, if there's a lot of spell use that's widely, commonplace, or are magic users like shunned and feared because they're so few and far between.
So if we were to cap this, let me ask. I'll start with Ty. 5th versus 3.5. Which one is higher fantasy?
I mean, they're both just fantasy in my opinion.
Neither high nor low.
No, they're not. They're not high or low. Like I can easily think of low fantasies. I can think of high fantasies. They are middle of the road. They're on a scale of 1 to 100. It's a difference of 50 to 51. Like they're right there next to each other.
Both of them. Okay.
Right
but
there in the
David,
middle.
for you, high fantasy, low fantasy is 5th and 3.5. Are they different?
Oh, vastly.
Okay. Which is which?
So I appreciate everyone's comments, and I really like with what Dave was saying and what Ty is trying to point at. If I was to play Kingdom Come, right? I am playing a medieval historical setting. That's not a fantasy game. Mm-hmm. That's a medieval setting. I am playing a fantasy game, so magic has to be in there. That's what makes it fantastical. 3.5 is absolutely high fantasy because of how you can make equipment, because of how prolific magic is in everyone's world in life, how common it is, how versatile and spontaneous it can be in the amount. Back in a 3.5 character can cast way more spells for each tier than 5e. 5e, 100%, as Pedro was saying, brought that down. They really wanted to number crunch, and I respect that, and I agree to it. It's just you can feel it in the world when you're like, hey, instead of casting Detect Magic as snap of your finger cantrips, it's now a 1st level spell, and you're like, I can cast that 3 times today, and I am burnt and I'm spent. I need to go make myself a sandwich. I'm done. That's low fantasy.
So 3.5 is high.
3.5 is high.
5th is low for you.
Is low.
Ty, they're both basically equal. They're unidentifiable as high or low.
There's so many more fantasy worlds out there that for me categorizing 3.5 and 5 as being low and high is too much of a simplification.
Okay, so Dave, I'm going to let you take the closing argument on this. 5th, 3.5. Which one's high, which one's low? What's your feeling?
I think that in my experience, I think 3.5 would be high fantasy because I think the way they designed that particular version, it was to have those mechanisms layered on top of each other and then used as a whole. So you had way more options that had a synergy that you could use together. I think in 5th edition, I think they tried to get back to a more simplified rule set, but still giving the players the options of obtaining things like permanent magic items and things like that.
Okay, and with that, you were the only one of us who drove down without company. What'd you do on the drive down?
Well, I listened to an audiobook that was a friend gave me, actually you gave me, and it was very interesting, and it was kind of nice to just sit there and be read to for, several hours and enjoy the ride, and I was able to get to the hotel and settle in nicely and relax and get ready for the festivities. Yeah.
So by the time we got down there, everyone checked in. I have been down there before. Dave went with me last year. We went to Henry's High Life. Arguably for me, in San Jose and anywhere else, the best barbecue I've ever had. What'd you guys think?
Yeah, I had to text a couple friends the pictures of the food, and yeah, surprisingly for those around here, I mean, all we really have for barbecue, I think, is Porter Street, and then there was another
Humboldt Smokehouse, Sammy's
closed,
Barbecue,
though, right?
but nope, they're still there.
Okay. I haven't been to. Wait, no, I have been to Sammy's, but yeah, the place Henry's we went to was better than all of those.
It's the best I've ever had.
And I love the barbecue sauce and the barbecue at Porter Street, but this was just either it was just really different or it was better. I think it's better.
How about you guys? How does it rank on your barbecue scale?
So, first off, first time down there, first convention. It was an amazing experience. You guys were jerks because you put me in the seat that faced right towards the cooking. So you guys are like talking to each other, and I'm just watching fresh baked potatoes, glistening steaks, and I'm like, oh, this is so tantalizing. It was good. It was good. It was for the price. Absolutely amazing. I have a picture of it. I don't have a high social media influence, but I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna take a picture of my food. I'm one of them now, guys.
We all were there. Just
I snapped pictures, sent it to everyone up here,
showed it to my coworkers when I came back, and they're like, yeah, that's some good food. I'm like, oh, it was worth every bite.
Dave, how about you? The second time at least for you.
Yeah, that's actually the third time I've been there. So I used to travel for work, and I, best barbecue I ever had was in Lexington, Kentucky. By far, I mean, the place, it was so good that I was trying to buy, the sauce off of them. I mean, anything I could have done to get it, they wouldn't give it to me. It was absolutely out of this world. But Henry's High Life is a great place. It's definitely in the top 5. I mean, they make a really, really good rib. Their sauce is great. The chicken was excellent. I think the only thing they're really lacking on, or I think their sides could use a little help.
Yeah,
I'd agree with
that. I agree.
That.
I think if they got the sides thing down, I mean, that place would be probably the best place that I've been to. It's just,
Ty, you're not even nodding your head. Tell us, what are you thinking?
Oh no, it was a fantastic meal through and through. I got the pork ribs and they were absolutely fantastic. I'm a real what's the word I'm looking for? I'm a big tourist, right? So I love going to anywhere that's famous. So when I was like, oh, this Man vs. Food in here, I gotta go.
And that's it. Man v. Food
right.
did an episode in San Jose. They were part of it.
No, that's my standard procedure. I was in Kansas City 3 months ago, and we're like, where are we gonna eat? I looked up diners, drive-ins, and dives, and have they been to any places in here? They'd been to 2. I'm like, well, I know where we're eating tonight. That's any place that's remotely famous. I'm gonna be like, I gotta get my picture in front of the giant fucking ball of yarn or something.
That's a solid guideline. I like that.
I like it.
So, following day, after laying down and sleeping on a huge, giant mass of meat.
No gaming that day, pre-everything.
For you.
Getting set up. Yes, for me.
Oh, wait, no, this is Thursday. You're right.
This is Thursday.
Right.
So, on to Friday,
yeah.
we register, we get in. What did everyone do? I was a complete and utter loser. I went to my accountant. So, everyone else gets to tell a story. Yeah, exactly.
I ran a game on Friday, so I ran Bunkers and Badasses, the Borderlands role-playing game. It was part of the pre-reg session, so for the people that registered and paid for the con online beforehand, were able to sign up for my game. I had a full group. It went really, really well. I think everyone had a great time, and it went smoothly. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
What'd you do Friday night?
Oh, man. Well, boy, let me tell you, I played in a fucking war game. It was amazing.
Friday night you played in a war game. Was it a con-sponsored one, or you just got a bunch of people together?
No, it was a con-sponsored one. So how the con works is they got all these different session brackets, and the con technically starts noon Friday, and the first time bracket is from noon to 6, which is what's considered the P session, which is only there for people who pre-registered, and that's where Dave's game was. He was in P session, but starting at 6 p.m., session 1 starts. There's 8 sessions in total, not including the P. And I had signed up for it's called the Battle in the Slot. It is not sexual. It is in reference to the Second Battle of Guadalcanal. The area between the islands is called the Slot. And we played a rule system called General Quarters 3. No one else here is a super big historical war gamer.
Nope, sadly that's true.
I am the black sheep of the group when
Every
it comes to this.
group's got to have one.
You were in pretty much all the war games.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
I comes to an RP convention to roleplay war games.
Yeah, correct. I go to an RPG convention and I'm in the historical war games section because I am a nerd amongst nerds.
Just to let people know, Ty was able to get into basically everything he tried.
Every game I wanted, I got into. And actually, there's the one, and the reason for that is because, strangely enough, not a lot of people wanted to get into historical war games at an RPG convention, so I really didn't have much competition, which was great. Actually, I actually preferred it that way. There's one RPG I got into, and it had a pretty high, a lot of people wanting to get into it. But that's a story for later.
That's a little later.
Yeah, it's later.
David, Pedro?
Friday.
What you guys do Friday evening?
So
Friday day evening.
Friday, I didn't get into any games. I think Friday we ended up just going to some game stores, right? That was the game store.
Yeah,
day.
well, I was at the accountant.
Yeah.
You guys were at the game stores. I think
Yeah.
you guys went to. Did you go to Game Castle? Was that?
Yeah, we ran down to Game Castle, which was cool. I generally just go to these stores and be like, okay, let's compare this to Barry's shop and see. And most of the time, it's Barry's shop has all this stuff, and except like some shops will just have more like Warhammer.
Right.
That's like
Right,
that's
they'll
usually
have
the,
depth.
I've yet aside from shops that have like a massive selection of used books, which honestly that's what I'm always looking for.
Me too, and I didn't find any this time.
Yeah, I will say Game Castle had a lot of different war game stuff.
They did.
And so it was really cool to see all of the different types.
Yeah.
There were some neat ones that Ty, you know pretty much them all. So
I know
we
them
got
all.
To, like run down the aisles, and Ty would be like, "This is the story of this one."
Yeah.
Everyone was just like a neat little tour
Yeah.
of war gaming.
That's why I like game castles. A lot of hobby shops are more like, oh, we do RPGs or we do magic cards. If it's a shop that does magic cards, I don't even roll down the window. Like I just
Yeah.
keep driving. But RPG stores are definitely a must go, and then any kind of wargaming stores where I stop. And yeah, I like Game Castle. I lived in Sacramento for a while, and they had one there, and it was it was one of my favorite stores there. And what I like about them is unlike some stores where they're like, oh, we stock. You want war games? I got Games Workshop. What else you got? I got Games Workshop. It's like, all right. They were like, oh no, we got Song of Ice and Fire, we got Infinity, we have Bolt Action, we have Flames of War, we have Conquest of Kings, all these things, Fallout Wasteland Tactics. These are all things that were in that store. Even though it was a relatively small store, they had a pretty large variety. Unfortunately, what you pay for that is the other things they don't have much of. So the Game Castle didn't have very many RPGs, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's the inverse, right? So instead of it just having Games Workshop, it has just D&D. You got any other RPGs? What other RPGs?
David, you went with them.
Yep.
What was your feeling on the Game Castle?
It was a great experience seeing from your store going out to a bigger city. I agree 100% with what Ty and Pedro are kind of describing. They're always great to check out. Even if you don't want to buy anything, it's just cool to see, because we did stop at other ones later in the session.
Yep.
And it's a great way to find books that you would never think, you would never see. I was really interested in like a war game. I forget what it was called.
Conquest of Kings.
Conquest of Kings. It just has
yeah.
amazing...
No, not Conquest of Kings. I misspoke earlier. Last Argument of Kings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just great looking stuff, and it's just wonderful because you're like, hey, like in the future I might want to get this. This is a great start to something, and it's just they were really friendly store, really friendly staff, and just kind of a good section. But that's where I would go if I was looking more for war games, miniatures. I wouldn't have gone there if I was going to go look for an RPG. I'd rather go to your store because I know you have a bigger book selection.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sure, that makes sense. Dave, what did you do Friday afternoon, evening after you were done with your Bunkers and Badasses game?
Yeah, after Bunkers and Badasses, I think I checked out the dealer's room really quick before it closed.
What was your thoughts for the dealer's room versus last year? Because
I
had some opinions.
I did too. It wasn't as satisfying as what it's been in previous years. Like my favorite T-shirt vendor wasn't there. There were some other guys selling some Hawaiian shirts or something. And it's cool. I get it. They gotta, do their thing and bring their wares and crafts, to the con. I miss the T-shirt guy was something I always look forward to, and it wasn't as satisfying as it's been in past years. But I still had a good time. The Goodman Games guys are always awesome. The ChessX guys are always like, look into, the Lost Ark of the Covenant,
Right. It's like jewelry shopping.
Yeah, right. It's really cool. So, it's fun. I think we could do less with the tchotchkes, and just get more,
That was my feeling, too. In fact, I think I mentioned it to quite a few of you guys that this year there seemed like there was an unbelievable number of connected things, but not gaming stuff. So hats and handmade dice and trinkets and there was Pedro and I saw the LARP guys that were doing live action dystopia.
That was okay. They had some good costumes. That was neat. They had a demonstration that it sounded fun, but I had other things that I wanted to do. So if I didn't have anything to do, that would have been something interesting to see.
Okay.
I'm on the opposite end though. I love tchotchkes.
Okay.
So I'm like, I wish there was more tchotchkes.
So it worked for Pedro.
I wish there was. So I
appreciate that.
I had a good time. I'm a sucker for a bunch of booths, so I went through there. I found some cool stuff. Got to get some gifts for a few people. I will say that I feel like there was more board game stuff than needed to be.
Yeah, there was a lot of
Mind
board
you,
games
that was both for that and later on the flea market too.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that one
But
too.
yeah, I think more RPGs would have been fun and more tchotchkes for me.
Okay. Yeah, more RPGs would have been nice for me too. I liked seeing Indie Press Revolution there.
Yeah,
and
there was
reasonably well.
The Goodman Games, I think, booth was probably the best, one of the better
Sure,
booths.
they had so much of their stuff there. It was beautiful.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that later. But I got to try that system, which makes me want to get more of their stuff.
Well, let's pop into Saturday. Right? So Saturday morning, session 2, and then session 3, and then session 4 was all Saturday. Yep. What did everyone do? Dave, you didn't run any other games, did you?
I did. On Saturday, I actually ran. So I had an event to run Mute Crawl Classics. It was on Goodman Games' calendar that I ran as an open game for anybody that wanted to learn the system. And we first it was just Pedro and I, and then a guy that was in my Bunkers and Badass game come looking for us because I told him I was going to be running it, and then we had another guy walk up with the book that, the Mute Crawl Classics book that he just bought. So he was like, oh, you guys are going to play? So he sat down, and another guy was like, you're playing Mute Crawl Classics, I'm in. So we ended up having a really good group for that. And we ran the kind of a 0-level intro scenario, and I think everybody had a good time.
Yeah,
that was awesome.
It was a super fun time because we ended up doing, and we had talked back and forth about doing 0 level or first level, and I'm really glad we did 0 level. Because it was really fun, especially character creation. It's all random dice. You get to have a bunch of fun little. When you're 0 level, you don't have your full mutant abilities and everything, but you get kind of a preview of what's coming.
Yeah.
And so it was cool. It was a fun little adventure, and the exploration on it was really neat. So it made me want to play it again. So I highly recommend it.
We're going to skip Ty for a second. David, what'd you do Saturday morning, afternoon, evening?
So Saturday morning, I didn't, because as Ty described, there's 3 slots. There's a morning, a middle, and then an afternoon, or a late night. I had an afternoon slot, getting to test the Exalted system.
Oh, wow. This is the new Exalted.
This was Exalted First Edition.
Wow. Okay, so back to the original White Wolf from years back.
And so I was super excited. This has kind of been a system I'm very interested in because it's very high fantasy. Because you are call back. It's mostly because
we just throw out that label for anything nowadays.
Yeah, it is. It's everyone gets it. It's a very high powered system, and I never got to try it. Sadly, the system was supposed to be a combat intensive, very heavy one. Me and 4 other people signed up. Me and 2 other people showed up, and I got stuck with my first ever group game with teenagers and younger, and that just didn't really kick off. The DM also was admitted to us that he was, only going to want to run in combat system, wasn't set up for an RP story, but we muddled through it. It was a good way to practice. And then essentially there was a point in the story where we're supposed to be very powerful characters, and the immersion.
I
got turned into a chocolate bar, guys. I got in a fantasy medieval setting, we were talking about, medieval Europe. Our team meets a wizard, and he pretty much approaches our table, and he's like, I know you guys are divine demigods. And we're like, what are you talking about? And he's like, chocolate bar. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, you're a chocolate bar, a Hershey's bar specifically. You don't know what chocolate is. You don't know what this is. And I'm like, okay. And then he's like, hey, it's time for lunch. What do you guys want to do? And I'm like, I'm good. Chocolate
bars for everyone. I'm out.
Yeah. I'm out of here.
I'm sorry, man. I got friends. We're going to go someplace. If I didn't realize we were going to have a lunch break for 30 minutes, I might as well just make it the rest of the evening. That being said, the system was still very fun to experience. The DM did the best he could with what he was given, and that's all you can really ask for from people. But yeah, for me, it's always a big turn off when you mix sci-fi and fantasy, and that wasn't the setting. So yeah, don't turn me into chocolate.
Okay.
Noted.
Well, I will tell you that for the morning, I was lame as far as gaming goes, and I went and watched my nephew play rugby. So,
yeah.
Ty, tell us about the war games.
Barry goes to a gaming convention, doesn't play games.
I do. I'm going to come back with one.
It's a different type of
fairly
game.
quick, but I'm going to let you go first.
All right. I got into both my games for the day, of course. mean, interesting. It was actually they were fantastic. So session 2, I had a Stalingrad game, which uses the Fireball Forward rule system. So it's another historical war game. You're going to see a pattern here. And it was fantastic. It used 15 millimeter scale models. There is a GM. Unlike a lot of popular war games, Fireball Forward requires a GM. So there has to be a player who doesn't play, who orchestrates any kind of events, hidden movement, things like that. And I thought that just helped with the immersion intensely. He did a really great job. It was 3 players versus 3 players, and only one of us had ever played the rule system before. So for having 6 people who had never played a war game before, this specific war game at least, he did a fantastic job. Very kind man, and it was incredible. It was the best kind of war game, so it came down to the last turn, to the last activation, to the last die roll. Without
Can't
going,
ask for better.
Can't ask for better. Can't ask for better. Like the objective, recreating the Battle of Stalingrad. So Germans versus Russians. Germans had to control 4 or 5 buildings. They controlled 3. There was the 4th one. There's only guy in there was a lone commissar with a pistol, and the German squad had to pass a morale check to charge the building. Since it's one dude, there's no test to even kill him. So if they make the charge, they just win. And they're the last activation. It's turn 5. So after this, the game's over. They roll a d6. 4 up, they pass. He rolled a 3. And everyone exploded. Everyone started cheering, and oh my god! And because of that one failed morale check at the very last turn of the game, it was a draw. I think by far one of the best endings I've had to a war game in a long time. It was so much fun. So that was my session 1 in the morning. What's really cool about this event is we all went as a group, right? And but we all go do our own things.
Absolutely.
And how it works is man, I just you step out and it's kind of like passing through time. You're like, oh my god, the sun's up. What's going on? Where am I? And text message group. And I think David brought me food or something, or maybe it was Pedro and Barry. I don't know. Someone brought me food at some point, and it was super awesome. And I hung out for a while because I had another game at 3, which is the session 2 slot. And that was actually the second half to that same Stalingrad game, which was super awesome. I won't go into crazy details about it, but needless to say, it was a great time. Same GM, different board, different missions, and that took me in through the rest of the night until afterwards when we all went out to the hot tub and stuff and hung out and had a great time just drinking beers and enjoying ourselves.
Absolutely. Dave, were you able to get anything other than the Mutant Crawl Classics on Saturday?
Yeah, I about 2 in the afternoon, I went into a Deadlands game.
Oh.
And I've been a long time Deadlands fan ever since Pinnacle released its first edition back in
99, I think
or
it
something.
was. Yeah.
So this was the first time I got to try the Savage Worlds edition. So I was pretty excited about that. The Game Master had a good feel of the game. Pedro was in the game with me, so I got to play this Herald character, and it was during Mardi Gras, and the guy had a good sense of real world kind of history of Mardi Gras and how he mixed in the Deadlands, Weird West trope. It was really cool. So that was a fun game. That was a cool game. I enjoyed it.
Pedro, anything you want to add? Because did you do another game other than Deadlands on Saturday?
No. So
tell us.
In the morning, I had looked and I was like, okay, I didn't get any of my morning games. That's fine. And then when the afternoon popped, I remember looking multiple times. Ty remembered looking, David remembered, everybody remembered looking and didn't see my name anywhere. And then I get a call at about 2:05 from Dave, who is like, "You're on the roster, get up here." And I'm like, "Oh shit, I got a game." So I ran up there and I was on the list, which I then think I looked online and again did not see my name, which then appeared the next day in that slot. So, anywho, I got to be in the Deadlands game, which was one of the ones that I really wanted to be in because I, too, love Deadlands a lot. And, the Game Master ran it good. I've only got to read the newest Savage Worlds of the Suede rules, but had fun with it. He did have a good grasp on the rules and the story. And, it was a cool story. He, tied in an old song that they still sing, and if I ever cease to love.
If I ever cease to love,
and he tied the lyrics into the story really well. Mm-hmm. I think one of my favorite parts. So it was a pretty short adventure, but he got to use the
playing cards,
the skill. Right? Yeah, we got to use the playing cards, and we used those for the skill challenge, which he had us. We had to get 20 successes, the 6 of us, before 3 rounds. And at first I was like, okay, I've heard of this, let's see how it's in practice. Is it going to be slow? But he did a great job of being like, okay, everybody discuss, where's the first person going, make your roll. The first person would go, get like a little story moment, could bring it back to the group, we'd discuss, and it'd be like, okay, well, you did that, well, now you can take that information and go do this. And so we got to have a nice little role play skill challenge. We ended up making it, getting the info we need, and being able to continue the story. So it was cool. It was very Deadlands, and I was glad I got to see the new rules.
I got to get into one of the games that I very much wanted to, and that was the Gamma World game.
Yeah.
I got in on, I want to say it was the Saturday evening. Got to play, he listed it as Gamma World D&D, which I had no idea what that was supposed to be, because Gamma World's Gamma World, it's not D&D, it's never been D&D. Turns out it was the 7th edition, which is the edition with the Pogs. Not really a campaign-oriented game, but what I like about the game is that it's very quick. 10 minutes or less to build a character that is viable. You can have a lot of fun putting together. You kind of figure out what you're doing. You have a random selection of mutations, a random selection of artifacts that you play with, and you just go. We got moving. He had some kind of a story set up, and the beginning of the story seemed to flow fairly well. We were teen friendly as well. We had one teen, and I think everybody else there was no younger than 45. So I'm not sure how the teenager enjoyed it. I played for a bit, but as the day waned on, sleep deprivation started catching up with me, and I ended up stepping out before the big challenge, whatever that was going to be, happened. But I had a pretty good time getting to relive Gamma World in one of the editions that I really didn't play that much. I played mostly first and fourth. Did anyone else get another game in on Saturday?
I believe that's when we got our Nemesis board game.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
when
yeah,
you're saying
forgot
you didn't
about
get to
that.
play another game, I see how it is. You don't care about us.
Well, no,
He
I
didn't play
didn't.
it.
Yeah.
I played Twilight Imperium, started about 9 o'clock or 9:30 with a guy who was really into it, so we were able to just sit down and literally start building the universe and played. We played till about 1:30, and then we were, crashing out because we had 8 o'clock games the next day.
That's awesome.
So let's move on to Sunday and 8 o'clock early games. Pedro, what'd you do Sunday?
So Sunday, I ended up getting into the second Deadlands game that I signed up for. However, when I had signed up, I don't think I realized that they were the same game with the same name. So I somehow got into that one, and that's when I also looked back and was like, oh, my name's on this first one now. Strange. So I didn't want to play the same game twice, and the game master said at the first one, like, hey, if this one's the same tomorrow, so if you want to play, you can, but it's going to be the same story. But David really wanted to get into that game and did not, so I ended up going with him to that one to see if we could just, swap places. So I had fun because while I didn't get into a game, it did open up time for me to be able to get David into that game so he could play Deadlands and have fun. And then it gave me enough time to get down to the auction in time to see that for a bit before the evening game. And then for the evening, I didn't get into anything that night, but the one thing that I wanted to get into, which not only myself and others at this table wanted to get into, but 21 other people put their prior reg
I think
into
that's it, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people. That was the 2E Dark Sun game, which I had fun at, and I've been wanting to try 2E for a long time, and I'm glad I did, because now I know I don't want to go back.
Gotcha. Since we all capped our night off with that, let's finish with that. So, David, what did you think about the Deadlands game that you got to play?
To go back and touch upon what everyone else said, my main goal going down to this was to try different systems, open myself up to see if these are things I would get into. I've had friends play Deadlands, and they're telling me you got to get into it. It's going to be great. Yeah, it's a great system, guys. It's very simple. It's very easy to pick up. The post-apocalyptic, weird, wacky Western world is such a cool theme setting. The DM was absolutely fantastic with his knowledge and his presentation and just his overall ability to handle the game. That was such a great system to use for investigation. It really made what could have been a tedious and slow thing into a much faster pace, more interactive situation. And then, yeah, it was just a way to feel very powerful, made fun decisions, and let you work with it. I would definitely play Deadlands again if I could.
And I know your game ran over into the time when we were playing Dark Sun, so you ended up bringing us food. But
Yep.
Dave, did you get to play anything until the Dark Sun on Sunday?
A couple of things before we close up on that Deadlands. One of the coolest things about Deadlands is the bennies, right?
Yes,
so having
such a
the
good
poker
system.
chips, to like improve your rolls or roll again, and that kind of thing really adds, that mechanism really adds a super cool, unique mechanic to Deadlands that makes it a really attractive, fun game to play.
And Deadlands does the fun thing where, like, because normal Savage World, they just have a Benny. They don't actually use the color system, but Deadlands, having the poker aspect, uses the, like, white chip is your base. You got your red, which is good but kind of bad for you, and then blue, which is good for you.
Yeah, and then there's the gold one.
Yeah, and the gold one, the legendary chip.
I love how initiative is chosen from, like, poker cards.
Yeah.
So you are literally playing poker, gambling while you're playing your story. It's a very Western feel. It's very good. It was such, and the bennies is fantastic to get role playing out of your players, to really get them to buy in, because it's such fluid change of coin. Such a great system.
So I was scheduled to go into a game that I've been wanting to try called Fantasy Age at 8 a.m. on Sunday. Usually by the time Sunday rolls around, you've had a couple late nights, and you're getting a little sleep, but you're like, okay, I got a game at 8 o'clock, so I'm gonna get up at 7, get some food, and be ready to go. But you're starting to get up a little slower, especially at 49 years old. You're kind of like, okay. But I knew that if I went into that game for 8 hours, I'd miss the auction. And two of the main things that for me were a goal were to get to the auction and the swap meet and find and acquire some very specific things that I was able to do, and we could talk about later. But I didn't want to miss that, so I didn't show up to that game, which opened up a seat for someone else to be able to play, because I was hoping that I was going to be in the Dark Sun game in the Sunday afternoon session, which luckily I was able to. So,
Ty, tell us about some war games on Sunday.
Oh yeah, so but Sunday. Oh, let's see here. So I signed up for the Battle of Dogger Bank, which is another naval war game. Used the same system as the Battle in the Slot that I mentioned earlier, except it was World War I. It was fantastic. I didn't allude to the first one. The first one I played, so Friday night, the Battle in the Slot, was good, but a couple issues with it. Number one, the GM was 40 minutes late. So, right. So we're all sitting around, like there's 5 of us, then there's 4 of us. It's like, hey, is the GM ever showing up? And I actually went up to one of the committee members for DunDraCon while we were there, and I was like, hey, what's the procedure if your GM doesn't show off? It's like, oh, we'll get you priority slips. Like, oh, okay, cool. So I go back and I sit there, and 2 minutes later, GM shows up. All right, cool, let's get playing. And then we played the game, and it was all right, but he was like, he had to set up rapidly. It's a very complicated rule system. I was basically the only one who really grasped the rules. Like by the end of the game, the other 2 players on the opposite team were still like, wait, how do I play? Wait, what am I rolling? So it was a little tedious in that regard. The one Sunday morning had the same GM, same rule system, the Dogger Bank one, but far more fluid, right? So it was me and 3 other players again, but everyone grasped the rules a lot faster. I had a better grasp on it because I'd played it once before. The GM was more ready, and it was a thoroughly great experience. I loved playing it. It was super fun. But the reason I brought up that first session is because the next day, so this is Saturday now, I'm backtracking one day, one of the committee members came up to me, the same guy who ran the miniatures room, which for those listening, how this whole thing works is it's at a hotel, and there's large conference rooms devoted to certain things. So there's a large room for open board gaming, there's a large room for the miniatures game, and then if you play an RPG, they've rented out individual hotel rooms which have had all the furniture taken out with a table in the middle for you to play, so you're privately playing these games. It's an incredible system. Anyway, so the person who runs the miniature room came up to me and he's like, hey, I know you had to wait around for almost an hour for your GM the other night. You had a really good attitude about it, so here, I want you to have this, and gave me a priority slip, which gets into, I don't think we've talked about tonight, how you even sign up for games. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's 1 through 8 sessions. Each session ranges from having 8 to 30 games to play in. for each session, you number 1 through 3 in that order, priority of what you want to play in. They put it all into a computer program, and then it generates who gets in the what. It's relatively complicated. I tried getting the information out of them. Half the people don't even know how it works. Essentially, though, it looks at what you got previously. So did you get into your number 1 pick last time? If you did, then you have a slightly lower priority on someone who didn't, and then it tries to make it fair and equal. Problem is, some people just get hosed, and all 3 of your picks, you don't make them into anyone, then you're just kind of SOL. The priority slip, however, is basically a veto card. Like, nope, I want into this game. And so I used that to get into the second half of my Sunday, which was the one RPG I played there, Dark Sun.
Dark Sun. Okay. Well, before we hit Dark Sun,
Yep.
do want to talk about the war game that I was most curious about.
Oh, right.
That I was
Yeah.
absolutely hoping and praying that you, Ty, got into.
Yeah.
That was I think he called it the Grassy Hill,
The Battle on the Grassy Hill.
which is, for Star Wars fans, David, take it away.
So this is the end of episode 1. It's the climactic battle, the Gungan forces against the Separatist, and it's that iconic scene set against the Windows XP background, and just this beautiful battle, very fun. But what was super important about this one, what was it? It was over 700 units.
It was specifically 400 Gungans, model specific.
400 battle droids.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because the battle droids outnumber the Gungans.
Yeah, it was 400
Okay.
battle droids. So you have it back.
My
Yeah,
fault.
400 battle droids.
400
300
battle
Gungans.
droids, the Roger droids, versus 300 Gungans. And the guy had a model for each one in standard 25mm scale. It was unbelievable. They were setting up when the first session of the war games started.
Right.
And by the time I came to look at the game you were playing, that World War I game, they still weren't set up.
Oh,
Yeah.
I watched them probably for longer than is sane. I watched for like 15, 20 minutes watching them just meticulously putting and lining up these droids and Gungans. It
was incredible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was insane.
I was fascinated by it. You know, being as someone who I would say my number one passion when it comes to my nerd hobbies is miniature wargaming. Of course, I'm intrigued by the game itself. To be clearly frank, I'm actually glad I didn't get into that game, because it's the kind of game where I'm like, wow, that is incredible to look upon. But that's it. Thank you. I got my picture. I got my picture in front of the big ball of yarn. Have a good day.
It did look like because it was just straight on.
Yeah.
So it looked
It
like
was
it'd
a
be
straight
kind of
line.
a slog, but I
So-
don't know war games as much.
Yeah, so not only was it it was a 6x4 foot board, and it was from right to left, model, and it was ranked. And if you looked, first off, the rule system was a custom rule system, homebrew. Didn't use any established. Didn't use Star Wars Legion. Didn't use any kind of Star Wars war game. No, it was just he had his own packet. Very nice man. Had his own packet. Like, hey, this is how it's going to work, and it was also gridded, which is not inherently a bad thing in wargaming because it simplifies movement, which is usually the most finagly part of wargaming, is how do you move things that are, accurate to what they are. But the problem for me with that game is that it was looked right. I'm going to put quotes around this because it could have been incredible. I didn't play in it. It looked kind of tedious, right? You have 400 B1 battle droids, 300 Gungans, and they only can move directly forward, right? Like a big chessboard. And the game went on for 7 hours. And and also it has one of those those issues that you have with, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? They had 7 players and 1 GM. It's like I just know, looking at it, I'm like, there's going to be a lot of me looking at my phone, right, waiting for my turn. But goddamn, was it a gorgeous looking game.
It was beautiful to behold.
It was, and they even had a giant, I don't remember the creature.
Yeah, the
name,
shield generator
creature.
creature. I don't have my xenobiology book open right now,
Then
but
I don't know if they actually launched it or not. But they even had the little trebuchet, or not the catapult launcher for
with the little
water
ion
droids.
droids
Yeah.
or ion ball things. Yeah,
So
it was
it was-
incredible. The
yeah.
Gungans were modeled with their shields. Like, the guy put so much incredible work into this. Like, the entire thing was jaw-dropping, right? Like, it was, of all the things, and there was some impressive miniature stuff set up that I unfortunately didn't get into. This was by far the most visually impressive.
I have to agree. Well, so we all except David, who was in that amazing Deadlands game, we all got into Dark Sun. I'll preface my time in there. I had wanted to go down and play Coyote and Crow, and one of the guys who was running, actually the guy who was running it, was very gracious and allowed me the chance to sit in. An incident came up. I was not able to stay, so I missed out on getting to play Coyote and Crow. My second was wanting to play Dark Sun, and so I ended up joining you guys. But David, you were the one that got in first. Actually, I think it was you and Ty both got into it, right, to begin with?
You guys actually got it. You guys chose it.
Yeah, we use priority red slips. You know, the way you get those priority red slips traditionally is if you volunteer 8 hours of your time to run a game or something like that, then they give you a priority red slip.
Which you did.
Yeah, which pretty much guarantees you get into the game that you used before, and then you use your red slip that you got from that committee member. So, yeah, we were in it to begin with. You know, I was excited. That was the one game in the program where, like, this is what I want to play. If I don't play anything else, this is the game I want to get into, because I'm a big fan of second edition. Although the game didn't really exemplify the fun parts and aspects of what second edition D&D brings to the table, it was fun to play in the Dark Sun world, which I've never played in, which I thought was cool. You know, it still left me with a lot of questions, you know, but I still enjoyed playing in the game.
Questions about Dark Sun or questions about 2E?
Questions about Dark Sun, you know.
Okay.
I wanted to know more. I wanted more descriptive, you know, and more kind of insight on the world.
Right.
I've spent a lot of time playing second edition, and I think it's great. Real familiar with it, and it all kind of came back to me even after all these years, you know, came back to me pretty quick. So
In the adventure, we were trekking, if I understand correctly, initially from Uruk to Tyr is what I think we were doing. I know we were going from Uruk.
Yeah, that was the adventure hook, is that we were slaves being taken and sold from Uruk to the city of Tyr.
Right, and Tyr, for anyone that doesn't know Dark Sun, Tyr is the basically the city-state that gets overthrown by the slaves.
Later.
And so, yes, right. And
That's its own campaign.
Exactly. Well, it's its own adventure, and it's also the first novel in the series. But he had the first and second edition box sets in front of him, and I think this was the adventure in the first edition box set. So this was the one before basically any of the other stuff comes out.
Right.
And again, like you said, before Tyr throws off the yoke of slavery.
Right.
But anything you guys want to add for the game? I had a good time. It went late. I mean, it went later than I felt like I was going to make it, but I plodded through.
Well, to kind of start off the experience, only Dave and Ty got in, and I wanted to crash, and Barry, I know you wanted to crash as well.
Yeah, after I wasn't going to be in the Coyote and Crow, I wanted to be in something.
I was surprised because you two were the only people, at least at first, that showed up on time.
Right.
And so me and this other guy got in, and then there was, one other open slot, and then, I yelled, shouted via text to Barry to get down here. And then one of the people who, to be honest, I don't know. I'm assuming he signed up, but he kind of just...
Yeah, he was
really late.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I just remember him kind of like, barging in and just kind of sitting down. And for all I know, he could have not been.
It was kind of crazy because if I remember correctly, that game had 21 people.
That's what I'm saying, because there were so many people, and maybe
that had pre-reg.
Yeah.
They had either priority regged or put that down as their first. So in the program where they tell you which games you've gotten into, they also have the ability for you to look and see how many people try to get in the game. So, for example, the Coyote and Crow that I was trying to get into had 29 people. Mm-hmm. We saw numbers in, I think it was the fourth session, the Saturday evening session, we saw numbers like 44 people had this game down as their first choice or
for
priority
the Aliens
reg.
game and stuff like that. Yeah.
So to have that many people in for the Dark Sun and then all of us getting in, it was kind of crazy.
So it was really fun. I've also been wanting to try the Dark Sun setting for a long time, and 2E. So for my experience, I did feel like I got an interesting glimpse into the world of Dark Sun. So that was fun, which it's kind of what I thought. It's, okay, we need to find water, and then we can do something else for now.
I think he did a great job. I don't know how everyone else feels, but I think he did a great job with making you feel how desperate you were for water.
Yeah, exactly. When he told us, like, in the beginning, we all got caught up. We're on this slave barge being transported, and then elves attack, and we get freed. But the elves say, all right, take 2 days of water. And it wasn't 2 days for all of us. It was 2 days worth for, like, a single person. And Dave playing a half giant,
Drinking 4 gallons of water a day.
Yeah, 4 times as much as any of us, even more so for the Thri-Kreen berry that you
no,
play.
less for me. I only had to drink 1 gallon of water a week, so I was in great shape. I was giving water out to everyone.
So it was great. And then at the time when you got knocked out for 2 days, it's like, okay, shit, let's hope we can find enough water to survive, giving you, even at half rations of 2 gallons. So it did good, and I could see myself playing in that world a lot more. I think the GM did a great job. I do think that towards the end, I think he was winding down like maybe he was ready for it to stop. So the ending, there was definitely more to it, but I think we had a fun ending, kind of like movie slow-mo, where we're all just running from the elves rather than, going back and fighting like we might have. But so that was fun, and my experience overall with 2E, it was an interesting thing to try. Thaco took longer than I thought for me to get. I think the biggest key point is that I was like asking the GM, okay, well, what's their AC? Like, I need to figure out if I hit, and it's like, oh wait, no, I roll, I tell him my Thaco, and the GM does the rest. So I see what they did, and I can see, it took me a minute. I was like sitting there, I was thinking like, oh, okay, so the Thaco kind of works like this, and then, I see how it transferred over to just like proficiency bonus. So I kind of saw the connectors. I think I would have had a lot more fun if that was the edition I had started on, learned it, grew up with, and then saw where we went to. Because now I'm just like, there's a lot to it, and I see the merit, but I could also play Dungeon Crawl Classics, which gives me that feel, but it's a little simpler, or like Morkborg for a more updated feel, but with that deadly aspect.
Absolutely.
So, and it might be that, Dave, if you ran it, it'd probably be a different experience. I get to see some more aspects of it. So maybe I'd play it again, but I got to see, for the most part, what it was, and that's what I wanted. So I was happy I got to sit in on that.
Anything more for the Dark Sun from you guys?
No.
So now we move to Monday. And I don't think any of us signed up for anything because Monday was the swap meet.
That was all that was on my mind, was swap meet.
So swap meet, let's tell a little bit of swap meet stories. I will start with my favorite story, which is you found a copy of Dogs in the Vineyard.
I can't believe it.
That has been something I've been looking for years, and you graciously gave me the copy you purchased.
So I was, it was really fun, but kind of with I would say even more so than the vendor's room, it was, I would say 80% board games. Like this was it was just mostly board games, which, mind you, okay. But I personally have moved slightly past my board game phase. While I still like doing board games, sometimes I also feel like I'm here 4 hours. Maybe I could be role playing. So I like to really pick and choose my board game times. But there was a good chunk of used RPGs, and I think my favorite row was where I found that game, because I go over, I see them putting stuff out. And I see that sitting there. I see this little. I love little tiny RPGs. That's my jam. So I pick it up, and I'm like, "There's no fucking way." Okay, how much do they want for this? And I say, "Hey, how much you want for this?" Like, if the guy was looking at me, he would have saw my eyes go wide for half a second, because I was like, "This is like finding gold." Okay, now let's see what this gold is going to cost me. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that whole box. Just pay what you want." And I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me?" And I heard other dollar this, dollar, like other people doing that, and I was like, "Would you take $5?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And I was like, "Okay." And then quickly ran away. I ended up going back and buying a few more things from him. And I know, Ty, you got like a real solid deal from that guy.
Ty, what did you get?
So first off, swap meet starts at 9. Vendors could go in at 8:30. I got a little ticked off because Barry, you went in, you're selling stuff, and you're gracious enough for me, like, "Hey, Ty, come in and look at this stuff." So I followed you in. I walked around, and I saw a couple things, but I'm like, real life, I'm lawful good, right? So I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty cool," and I walk out. And I'm sitting there. Specifically, there's this dude who was selling historical miniatures, right? That's my thing. Mm-hmm. And
he was right next to me.
Right next to Barry.
Literally at my table next door.
And he had 2 totes. One had a bunch of infantry. One had a bucket of vehicles, and then he had a couple little like boxes of them and stuff like that. And I'm like, "Oh my god, that stuff looks good." And I'm sitting there, I go back out, I'm waiting in line with David, and it's like, opens at 9, 8:55, big old dude comes walking out, and he's carrying that box of models, and he's like, "Oh boy." I'm like,
What?
So the question is,
Ooh,
next year, will Ty be lawful good?
It pushed my alignment. I'll tell you what. Like all I did was want to buy that thing, and I was pretty ticked off. And he went and took it to his room, and then came back like 2 minutes before it started. I'm like, if he goes in there and buys all that stuff, I'm gonna be so pissed. Luckily enough, he didn't. You know, we went in there at 9. I went right to that table. Of course, the box of vehicles was gone, but the infantry, the other boxes of like there's some planes and stuff like that, threw it all into a tote. And I'm like, he was like, how much you want for this? He's like, I don't know, make me an offer. I said $50, and he was like, deal. I mean, I probably, hindsight, should have haggled for less, but frankly, that box, a pack of Flames of War Battlefront miniatures platoon is worth $50, and there's probably 6 platoons in there. So, I mean, definitely worth the $50.
Yeah.
But the real highlight of it, same place where Pedro found his RPG. So it's not on the podcast, but every Sunday I do a Warhammer Fantasy RPG. It is by far my favorite RPG ever. I know the world like the back of my hand. It's my favorite fantasy setting, and I go over there, and I play 4th edition fantasy. And I go over there, and he has the cool core rulebook for first edition Warhammer Fantasy, 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy, and 9 hardcover supplement books for 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy. And my eyes go, wide like Pedro's, because I'm like, oh my god. And what's cool about this is, even though it's a different edition, 2nd and 4th share the same core rules. Third deviated and went to this weird Fantasy Flight system, but 2nd and 4th have the exact same D100 system. So the things with a little tweaking by the GM are compatible. So I was like, hey, how much for this stuff? And just like Pedro's like, make me an offer. I'm like, all these books, $10? Question mark. And he's like, deal. I'm like, so I grabbed that. Like, that by far, like, I would have, like, I don't even know what I would have paid for that stuff. Like, I've never seen that stuff in person, like, let alone, like, a PDF for that book probably cost $45, let alone all of that in hardcover. So I'm just, that was, like, David can attest to this. Our entire drive home, I was sitting here reading off bestiary entries into his ear because I'm so freaking excited about this thing. So by far,
it was my podcast.
I was his podcast because I'm just like, you want to hear about a siren? Like
we're going to talk about giant crustaceans.
Yeah. What was that called? It was the Promethean.
The
Promethean, the giant crab in the Warhammer Fantasy book. Anyway, so absolutely incredible. It was a great keystone to a absolutely great time.
And so I'm going to save the best for last, so I'll step over to David. David, did you get anything?
I did not.
Well, that was quick.
Yeah. All right, guys. Let's go back to the real story. No, I didn't. There were things I was very interested in. Again, it is a very board game heavy centric area. The biggest thing I would recommend to anyone ever going to a convention, this was my first one, so I definitely wasn't prepared. Bring money and leave space in your suitcase. You don't need to bring your own dice. You don't need to bring anything. People will provide for you.
Bring cash.
Bring
cash. Yeah, do not bring plastic.
Yeah, it's apparently it's the only thing that isn't. It's just as fantasy there as it is in the real world. It means nothing. But there was some great stuff. The biggest thing I always like, especially now, is getting into miniatures, and they have some gorgeous miniature statuettes, like large dwarven bust of things, like great stuff. It's so expensive when you go and look at it. You're like, hey, am I going to buy this full replica, like, German castle with drawbridge activated, like, easily takes up the size of this table, $2,000. And you're like, I'll just, imagination, guys. Is
that actually what he wanted for that?
Yeah.
He wanted $2,000 for that castle?
Yeah.
That was impressive. It was impressive.
It was a cool castle, but god dang.
That's insane.
It's cool. It's cool. And like I talked to Ty because Ty, prints off his little miniatures.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, man, I'm not gonna buy a castle if it doesn't open. Like, it's just really a cool like diorama. Only when I circled around later, because I just walked around a lot to see what was there and double check stuff. Clearly, he had tried to show people that it could open, and that was a huge kerfuffle. He made a terrible plan. He spent, I'm assuming, the rest of that swap meet just trying to piece that castle back together. So, hubris on like, hey man, this is what you want. Don't move these pieces.
So our big winner for Flea Market was Dave. Tell us about your haul.
Well, when I originally decided, I knew I was going to go to DunDraCon, but the thing I had in mind was, the auction and the swap meet, because last year when we went, we really got some great deals and
We
some
really
neat
did.
stuff. And I've been trying to fill some holes, especially with like D&D and Spelljammers and different things that are coming out, trying to buy some of the old products that are hard to come by and very expensive on places like eBay and other marketplaces. And I knew that, hey, I'm either going to go and find like Spelljammer box set original, at DunDraCon somewhere, or I'm going to go on eBay and buy it the next day after I leave. And, it's about $150. And, me, I'm kind of, I believe that everyone needs to get in there and they need to accomplish their own personal goals on what they want, to come out. So, me, I don't have any qualms about walking in that door unless some committee person says, hey, you don't belong in here, get out. Those guys are there. They're as soon as their shit hits the table, they're ready. Money's going to talk. And I came in to move mountains. I had a large pocket full of money, and I said, you know what? I'm going to buy whatever I want here, and I'm going to walk out with this stuff. And I was able to find that Spelljammer box, and I kind of haggled the guy down a little bit. And, and I walked out very happy. I got some, original first edition AD&D books that filled some spots on my shelf. And, once I had that, I knew I was good to go. I didn't need to see anything else, and I headed on out. I was showing Ty and Dave, and I was like, all right, guys, I'm going to hit the road. So, yeah, I did well, and I accomplished what I set out to accomplish, and, it was a win for me. So next year, I don't know what's next, but...
Well, that's a perfect way to close. Let me ask each of you, as far as next year for 2024, David, you're nodding your head. I'm going to start with you.
Oh,
what are you doing next year at DunDraCon? Are you joining us?
Oh, yeah. I would love to go back again, guys. Like I said, first-time convention. I highly recommend, even if you're not a nerd and you have something that is a convention that isn't something you love, absolutely go to it. It is a once-in-a-lifetime experience to just hang with people and be in your element as a true passion enthusiast and then get to deal with it. I would love to go again. I'm absolutely going to run games. I was worried about my caliber as a DM, about my preparedness.
You realized.
And I was like, dude, I could do this, and I don't know if it'd be okay, Ty, for us to talk a little bit about that.
You could talk about it. It's in the alpha prototype stage. But yeah, you can talk about it.
We're in the planning stage. I really like the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games, and having talked to Ty about the Stalingrad, how and some of his other games, the units that survived carried over into other games.
Yeah.
That is such a great mechanic. It built such an awesome world. So Ty and I are planning to make both of our interests united. Ty is going to try to run a Star Wars war game that would be simultaneously going and influencing my RPG that would be happening on a different day.
Oh, wow.
So it would be just like the movies. The starship battle is affecting the ground battle. I will keep track of whatever units have gone down, how that influences whatever the mission is. I think it could be a really cool play-on system. It was a wonderful experience.
Okay.
Would love to do it again with you guys next year.
All right. Well, Ty, that leads to you. Are you going?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no question.
All right. Do you want to tell us anything more about what you're planning on doing there? Are you just going to run a war game and we're going to have to wait and see next year?
Yeah. Running a war game would be really great. RPG would be, I feel like, a little more of a confidence booster. Nothing more depressing than putting a game out there and no one signing up for it. I think if I were to run Star Wars, it'd be pretty safe bet there. A lot of people, there's a brand recognition with that. And yeah, so as David talked about, we've discussed the idea of running a cooperative story when it comes to our two things that we'll be playing next year. It's just a matter of hammering out. We want to do something special, right? We don't ship A falls in area B. Like, oh look, RP, look, ship falling and it's hitting area B. Like, we want to make it special. So there's a lot to hammer out. I mean, we got a year to pick.
You guys have a year?
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Dave, how about you? I know the answer, but I'm going to ask you to put it on air. You going next year?
Yeah, I mean, I've been going to DunDraCon for close to 20 years now, and there's not a whole lot that'll keep me from that convention. I definitely plan on being there, and I definitely plan on running the game, as I encourage every year people to run games. The more games that are on the program, the more games that people have the availability to choose from and try new things. It just makes the whole experience better. So you'll find me there.
I love the thought of bragging rights between all the people from NCRP Productions going down there and saying, well, my game had 51.
Right. I'm going to lose that game.
I set the record. Pedro, how about you? This is your first convention other than the small ones we've had in our area.
Yeah, I mean, I'm after this one, it was it was such a fun time. Just like David said, I mean, get out whatever your interest is. Get to a con, because I wasn't sure how it was gonna be. You know, I mean, I knew I was gonna have fun, but as soon as I got there and started like walking around and doing stuff, it just felt great. So it was really nice being around all these people that like the same interest. I mean, you could throw a rock and hit somebody and talk to them probably for hours.
Especially because you just
and
threw a rock
apologize.
at them.
Yeah, exactly. Throw it into the right room. You have a good LARP on your hands. So
Fireball.
So I'm definitely gonna go again next year. I'm definitely gonna run something.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure, but since there was only one Deadlands game and so many people tried to sign up for it, I think I might do that because I love
think that'd be
Deadlands.
great.
Lost Colony.
Yeah, it's one of them. The Lost Colony, Hell on Earth, or regular Deadlands. Either one. I think I'm going to run a Deadlands. Also, something we didn't mention, we did all go down together, and we all did have T-shirts on. So it was also cool just to kind of be like walking around the con, see from across the way, like, oh, there's one of us. So I'm looking forward to next year also, because I think we're going to probably get even more people to go down.
I think we are from the podcast.
I had somebody ask what that was, what the shirt was.
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah, same here. So
And you told them
what
and
is
gave them a business card, right? Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
so we got to do a little fun networking, and it was also cool. Just I got a few pictures, and they'll be up on the Patreon just to kind of just showing us walking around in mass. So
I like the fact that I came home on Monday evening, popped onto YouTube, and I'd like to believe it's because of this, but we had 3 new subscribers on our YouTube channel over the weekend. So
Yeah.
kind of cool. For me, I'm definitely planning on going next year. Only situational stuff outside of gaming is going to stop me from going. And Dave pushed me to run something, and I bailed this year because I knew how crazy it was going to be. Next year, I think I'm going to do the same as you guys. I think I want to run.
yeah,
So, well, that's kind of our DunDraCon special.
yeah, that's our con episode.
Oh, for the record, it's DunDraCon,
Yes.
not
It is.
DunDraCon.
Right.
DunDraCon, get her done.
It is
Yeehaw.
DunDraCon. I'm
Yeah,
looking at
Which
it.
stands for
Live
Dungeons
action.
and Dragons Convention.
Yes.
Right,
Not
but
us.
for the record,
Right.
Dave and Barry, without fail, will always call it DunDraCon.
Get her
And
done.
when I was first hearing about this game, they're like, "Oh, it's DunDraCon." I googled it. Like, what's DunDraCon? It is a Dunder Mifflin convention where they watch The Office or something. They dress up as Dwight Schrute. I don't know.
Gotta
It's
go.
weird. It is not the same. This is DunDraCon.
Right.
Not a single person I talked to called it anything but DunDraCon.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It is.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
no,
It
it's
is a hard D.
DunDraCon.
Yep.
When you're searching it up,
Dundra.
we did not go to an office convention.
Correct.
No, just to make sure
I did.
everyone
I
knows.
did
so
dress
funny.
like Dwight Schrute, but that is unrelated.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought you were like from a distance. You know, I had my glass on. I saw you on Monday morning. You were wearing the black-shouldered gold, bottom sweater, and I thought you were in a Star Trek LARP.
Yeah.
I thought you were like
Yeah.
you were engineering, right? And you were dressed for the LARP.
That's first off, that's not engineering. That's the captain's uniform for
That is
Kirk.
It's command
and
and
engineering. Yeah, it's command.
No,
and
engineering is red normally.
I don't know.
No, tactical is red.
I just know Kirk wore
I
that.
know, I could be
In the
wrong.
original,
Blue is
gold-
science.
Gold
Scotty
was
wore
in
red.
was commanders,
Command only. Yeah.
and then
And it
in
changed
next
from yellow to-
generation
yellow to gold
it
to
switched
green.
over. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Good times.
yeah.
Well, all
sounds-
right, guys.
all right.
Well,
Thank you.
Ty, thanks for joining us. Dave, thanks for joining us. David, glad you were here.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Pedro, till next time.
Till next time, everyone. Thank you.
See you
Good
next
night.
year.
Have a great one, guys.
All right.
Thank you for joining us on another NCRP Productions podcast. We couldn't do this without you, so please like and subscribe everywhere we're found, including YouTube, Facebook, Anchor, Google, Apple, Spotify, and other great podcast sites. If you'd like to help us continue making more content, we'd love to have your support on our Patreon. And if you have any feedback for us, please feel free to comment on our podcasts or email us directly at ncrpproductions@gmail.com. That's ncrpproductions@gmail.com. And we'd like to give a special shout out to our current patrons, MD Parker 4, Chef Francis, Crowman 76, Loading Mad Cat, M. Coling, November Stevenson, and Rosix13. Thank you all. We truly, truly appreciate it.